the difference? You know what I'm asking. What's the difference when in the divine will I give that person, that group, to God for salvation, for healing, for deliverance, for whatever?
Yeah.
Will you tell us the difference when I sit down?
I'll try to do it. I'll try to talk to you about it.
Yeah, will you tell everybody, because we all want
Well, I'm here for everybody. You know, when we start off this talk today, we spoke about how Jesus said, "Pray thee our Father," and he taught the prayer. He's the one that formed the prayer. He's the one that taught it to us. But we know immediately that whatever he asked the Father, he's going to get. And when we ask in the divine will versus outside the divine will, we're asking God the Father with the same will that he has. So the power of that is immensely greater than being outside the divine will to ask the Father, or the Holy Trinity, for favor for our children to be saved, or to get out of a terrible mess they got into and get back in good order again. So the power of the divine will is far, far greater than the human will. That's just one thing. The other thing is, since you are in, I'm assuming you're in the divine will. I mean, I don't know, each person here is a different situation, and I hope we all will be in the divine will for long if we haven't already. But you're closer to the soul of your children than his soul is to his body. You are closer to your children than their own souls are to their own bodies. So you have immediate contact with them, and you should use the faith that you've learned, that you've gotten, to understand that this whole thing is ultra serious for the glory of God and for the good of men. That we use that power to be inside of them, closer than their own souls. Because Jesus says, "My will is closer to the person than his own soul is close." So his will is immediate to them, and immediate to their soul and their body and everything about them, past, present, and future. So with the same will that God is, he's letting us have that same will. We'll be united with him, and we'll be operating in that soul to move it by the grace that the divine will emits to correspond. They talk about efficacious grace. Efficacious grace is a grace that always works, in spite of the human will. Many, many saints have the blessing of the efficacious grace. And so with this divine will, I think the possibilities of having an efficacious grace is much higher than outside the divine will. So efficacious grace means it always works. Or God gives a grace and he says it's going to work, and that's it. So, but that doesn't always happen, because he doesn't have to give us an efficacious grace. He has to give us sufficient grace. He has to do that in order to be a God, a Father. He has to give us the sufficient grace to do what we should do. But then, when he gives us an efficacious grace, no matter what our personality is or what our defects are, it's going to work. So we have this power at our disposal. So that's the best I can do at this point. Okay.
Fabulous, thank you.
All right.
So, sorry.
Yes, sorry. It's just sort of, I'm trying to get it clear of what you're saying there. If a person is in the divine will, and God knows that person's concerns, so if in your mind you're concerned about your family, automatically by you being in the divine will, your family will be brought into God's divine will.
Well, like I said, we can't outdo God. If God himself acting in us does not give that efficacious grace, then he will give sufficient grace. But their free will is always ready to mess things up. So he will not force a free will. But so we're going along with the action of God, but he gives us the right to say that we did it because we allowed him to operate in us freely. And so that's the difference between, okay, it won't be automatic necessarily.
But he will give at least sufficient grace to that person and allow them the free will. He will always give at least sufficient grace to the person, but then they stand having to use their free will to allow it in and to allow it to work.
Yeah.
And so would you say something about the struggles of being in and out of divine will then? Sort of, you're in divine will and next time you're falling in and out of it or whatever. How does one persevere in it? Or how do you get to a stage?
Well, make it more and more from, the prevenient act and call the divine will in your actual acts and try to find time to read more and more of the Lucian. And little by little, over a period of time, when you see the ultra value of this, you're going to be much more careful not to lose it, even for a moment. Because Jesus said, even if you lose one act, you lost a whole paradise. He said, every act, in heaven, we heard the expression, there are many mansions in heaven. But Jesus tells Lucian there's many types of paradises in heaven too. And so every act that we do in the divine will is a paradise that God has ready to give us when we arrive in heaven. So we don't want to miss any act if we can. But the more we understand and know about the divine will, the more we're motivated to be much more careful and attentive not to do our own will. But one of the things, like St. James says, is most of us, well, I forgot how he said it, but he talked about how the tongue is the source of all kinds of sins. So a lot of times we get in a conversation and people start to talk about somebody in a way that shouldn't be talked about, and then you get a little edgy about that. So you really should, it depends on the circumstances, but you should remove yourself from that source of conversation or offer it up to God that they'll have the grace to stop. But you don't want to, where did I go with that? I was thinking of something, I want to go with that point. Those sometimes are hard situations to get out of because you're with people you know, people you like, and they start a negative conversation. So what do? Did you get up from the restaurant and go out the door? No, not necessarily what you do, but you could do that. But we're always, in these current days, we're always in situations where we're tempted. But Jesus says that lead us not into temptation. And he says, I don't think we talked about it today, but he says, and that reason I worded it that way is because deep inside the soul of every human being, there's a longing, at least anybody with goodwill, there might be some people who don't have any goodwill, but there's always a longing without even realizing what he's longing for. He's longing for that first bread of the divine will, the first bread in the Our Father. Give us this day our daily bread. The first bread is the divine will. Second bread is the Eucharist. Third bread is the daily necessities for our life. So when we have the divine will and we're steady and consistent in it, then temptations really don't amount to much. We get in situations where there's temptations, you just knock them out of the way and we're going to pay attention to them. So that's the way it comes, and that's the way he wants it. Adam and Eve, of course, didn't have any temptations, but we do. But the divine will is what takes us away from temptation. In other words, if the temptation may be there, but it won't be anything that takes root in our soul, we want to follow that temptation. For example, in my own life, I didn't know where I'd be 40 years later when I first learned about it. But it's really a lot different than it was 40 years ago. and I would like to live another 400 years, learn all this divine will stuff and be, because whatever you take with you when you die, that's going to be your different paradises in heaven, It's going to be your heavenly. But the other thing that I found was that Jesus said that your pining away to be with me in heaven is good. and he likes that. So I might be making a mistake, but I've asked him, I said, Jesus, I know once you make a decree, there ain't nothing you can do about it. Once you make a decree, it's done, and ain't nobody gonna change it. I'm just making fun here now. I'm from North Georgia, United States. North Georgia, that's what we talk, man. No, just talking. So, I said, well, dear Jesus, if, I like to think it was possible, when you were talking about creating me or whatever, that you gave me enough acts that I would be able to live a long time and learn more and more and more about your divine will before I go to heaven. But I know if he's already decreed that I have enough acts for tomorrow, there ain't nothing I can do about it. Maybe we didn't bring that up, but we're not given days, years, and months to live. We're given acts, a number of acts to have to live out. And we can choose the acts with free will. We can choose good acts, bad acts, indifferent acts, whatever. But when our number of acts is up, we go. And I'm not going to try to explain suicide and murders. I can't explain that. But Jesus says, I've given everybody a certain number of acts on this earth. Scratching your nose is an act, breaking your eyes is an act, taking the steps is an act, brushing your teeth is an act. So when all those acts are completed, there you go. So that's why I mentioned, I hope you give me enough acts to last a while.
Sorry, is the Divine Will movement very big in America?
Is it big in America?
Yeah.
That was the first country that really got big. And I don't know if compared to other countries now, I don't know whether percentage-wise, we still up to some other countries. But when it started off, like in 1994, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
In 1994, when they opened the cause of beatification for Louisa, the Archbishop, his name is Carmelo Casati, during his talk, when he's on the stage, everybody's in the audience, or he was on the altar, I don't know where it was. But anyway, he said 3 times, very emphatically, he said, we don't know, we don't understand why Louisa is better known and better loved in America than she is in Italy. He said it 3 times. And but later, things, developed differently, and we don't know right now who's sexual people, who's or what. I don't know, I don't keep up with that. But at one time, we were the biggest group. But I don't know if we are today. But Ireland is doing really great. Ireland is doing very great. And percentage-wise, they'll not be far above us, percentage-wise, because, most of the people in Ireland were brought up Catholic. I live in an area right now that's only 2% Catholic. 2% where I live right now. When I lived in Florida, it was better. But here in Tennessee, this particular locale, hardly any Catholics. But I don't know why I put me there, but he did.
Tom,
Yeah.
just ask you a question. Are any of our separated brethren involved in the divine will?
Is anyone done
Are
what?
any of our separated brethren?
You don't know.
Are any of our separated brethren in the divine will?
Non-Catholics.
Non-Catholic.
Okay, when it comes, now I understand what you said. I had the same question the other day. Can Protestants live in the divine will? And I told them, not really, until they fall in love with the church that God set up for mankind. And they love Jesus, they love Mary, and they love the papacy. And so those 3 things are very key to being in good order. You have to be in good order with, but on the other hand, here's what's happened with many people that I know that are Protestants. And I know a lot of them. There's a lot of Protestants that I know personally, and I'm sure there's a whole lot more that I don't know. They have the real good will to come into the Catholic Church, and in spite of all the weaknesses of the church today. And almost the next day or almost next week, they hear about the divine will. And God makes them hear about it. And then they get really excited about it, they become part of the prayer groups and so forth. And so they were Protestant but became Catholic, and then they came to the divine will. I only know personally, I only know of one person who's not in the church who I think is definitely very much in love with the divine will, and she's the wife of a Lutheran minister, and that's in Norway. Now, he's a lot older than she is. In fact, she's still alive. He's still alive. And the first time I met her was in Garabandal. And what happened to her was she had gone to Medjugorje, and there was what do you call it, a walking hermit or a traveling hermit guy who had a bag of books and stuff that he was carrying with him all the time. And she invited him to come up and visit them up in Norway. So when he got there, they had a little time together. Then when he was leaving, he said, "Oh, I'm going to carry all these books. Oh man, where are we at?" So he left some Divine Will books for her. And she started reading and just got really excited. Well, anyway, she went to Garabandal, and she was downtown near the church, and somebody mentioned something about St. Hannibal. And she pinned the person down and said, "Gosh, let me know more about what you know," because she knew what that name meant. And then I guess that led for her to come up to the House of Sanctification. We have a retreat house in Garabandal called the House of Sanctification. And so she came up to our house, and then we've got to be really, really good friends. And she loves the Catholic Church. She's married to a Protestant Lutheran minister, so there's a little problem there. But I'm sure that when he dies, that she'll come in. At least I think so. She even invited us up to visit also her place where they live in Norway. Now, I'd like to, if someone had a question about Garabandal, and I'd like to go ahead and answer that question. In the beginning of this word starting to get out to the world, but back in the late 60s in Italy, but then it started to get out other places, Mexico and different places around the United States and different places. Early 70s, where all of this started coming out. And the people that I met, and many different places in those days, all the ones that were getting enthusiastic about the divine will, I mean every one of them, were Garabandalistas. They were followers of Garabandal. Okay. Now, the reason I became interested in Garabandal, I just hope to make it a little brief because I won't spend a lot of time doing this. But I had gone to New York. I had been in the Air Force some years before. And believe it or not, I was trained to drop the atomic bomb on Russia. When during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was being trained, but the crisis was over before I even finished the classes. But when the classes were over, though, I had an assignment to go to a transport system instead of being the bomber system. So I got to see the world. But okay, went back. I got out of the Air Force. So I'm going that story now. And then I went to work for the government. Hated it. So I went to get a more education, got a master's degree and so forth. Went to work in New York, and I hated New York. I was there, but I hated it. And but while I was there, oh yeah, I know what it was. I picked up a book at a bookstore about Fatima. I already knew about Fatima when I was a little tiny kid. The nuns told me about it. And I picked up a book on Fatima, and I read half of it one night. And I was very, very moved by what I read. It was written by Thomas Walsh. And the second night I read it, God gave me an overpowering grace. And I started weeping and weeping and weeping and weeping and crying over my whole life, every sin that I'd ever committed I could think of. From the time I was 6 years old, 7 years old, until I was 31 years old at that time. And then I turned out the light, and as I did, another light came on, just like a flash. Then I went to sleep like a baby. The next day I found Garabandal. The very next day I found Garabandal. And I went out to see Joey Lomangino, the blind guy, but he wasn't there, but I got to talk to Conchita's brother, even though I didn't know he was our brother at that time. And so one thing after another, I just came head over heels in love with Garabandal. And it moved me to want to study everything I could about our Blessed Mother and everything I could about the Catholic faith. So I spent, another thing, I lost that job not long after that happened. And so I went as far away from New York as I could get, just to be on the eastern side of the United States. And I ended up living on a plantation. It wasn't no longer operating as a plantation, but it was heaven on earth compared to New York. So I really was, anyway, I won't go into all the rest of the story too long. But a lady saw my goodwill, I'd say, I'm just surmising, but she said, in order to work for me, I got to take a lot of stuff out of your wants, I got to get you down. And she got me all the way down to food stamps. Food stamps, when you don't have any money, you have to go get some food stamps so you can eat. So she got me all the way down to food stamps with my wife and daughter. And after she got me down there, then she brought me back up a little because she got everything out of my system that I had when I went to New York to work. So then I started, I devoted my whole life. But then just a little bit later, she introduced me to the Divine Will. That was in '73. Actually, I was in the presence of Louisa's writings in '72, but I won't go into that story, but I didn't really know what it was all about until '73. Okay, I'll tell you one more story about that, because when I first learned about the Divine Will, I was trying my best to understand what God did in Louisa that he didn't do in the saints. In other words, I knew all the saints had learned the great secret. The great secret to be holy is do the will of God. The proper place, the proper time, so forth. If you're a mother and you're home like it was in the 40s and 50s, if you're home waiting for your children to come home like it was back then, it's not time to go visit the Blessed Sacrament and say a novena. It's time to be home to do your duty and take care of your children coming home, make them feel happy and comfortable, and so there's nothing they have to worry about. And when we have people, everybody doing their duty, which comes before piety, duty is always before piety, always before piety. Except, on Sunday we have all of us have to go to church, of course. Then everything is in a stable order. If the father does his duty, the mother does her duty, and then everything in the family gets to be stabilized. I mean, I'm not saying it's always that perfect, of course, but without everybody doing their duty, there's no stability. Nobody can count on anything. So that's first, and then piety. So anyway, I said, what is the difference between what the saints did to become really super holy, it seems, and then what Louisa had? So I couldn't figure it out. I mean, I started talking about Louisa, started talking about it at the church in our little prayer meetings we got together on Thursday night, and I would say things, and I might have said some things that were wrong, but nobody else knew I was wrong. So he didn't chase me out. All right. So anyway, finally on my birthday, I think I told that story to you before, but on my birthday in 1975, one of the priests who had sent me the first information about Louisa, he had to be traveling through Florida on the way to Mexico, and he stopped at my home for a few days. And he gave me a manuscript about what they had learned at that point. They didn't learn a great deal, but they learned enough. And about that thick, and that 8.5 by 11 or size A paper, and he wanted me to get it reproduced and give it out to people. So it was written in English, it was translated in English. So I was reading that manuscript. I'll never forget the moment that this happened. It was 11:25 p.m. on July 22nd, 1975. And I read about, and remember this is back when I was just being introduced, you know. But so I started reading about how Adam, and in one paragraph, and the page opened up, I started reading this paragraph. It said, as Adam and Eve were walking along in the Garden of Eden, and they were picking up flowers and smelling the fragrance and looking at their beauty and just enjoying themselves walking around, it said something incredible, which I didn't believe at first. He said, God the Father was watching them, and he was fascinated and enraptured at watching Adam and Eve walking along, having a good time, picking up flowers and stuff. And I said to myself, that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. That the supreme being of the universe, you know, the whole, you know, heaven and earth, would be fascinated and enraptured in watching two human beings walking along picking up flowers. And he told me, not with words that you could hear, but with thoughts. He put thoughts in my mind immediately, and he said, you're right, Tom, that is kind of ridiculous, isn't it? But that wasn't what was happening. I was watching my own will operating in those two people. And every time they took a step, I saw all kinds of incredible things come out of those steps. Marvels and marvels and marvels of the divine will coming out of each one of their steps and picking up a flower. I was watching my own will operating in two other beings other than myself. You know, and so when he put that in my mind, wow, I understand the difference between Louisa and the saints that have gone before. So they didn't possess the divine will, the people that have gone before Louisa. She's the first after Our Lady Assumption. And so that was a prime moment when I got over the first hump of trying to figure out why Louisa is so different than the saints. And that was it. From then on, I just coasted. Didn't mean I didn't have some tests. Doesn't mean I didn't have some tests. In fact, everybody who's serious about living in the divine will get a test here and there. It may not be a big one, it may be a small one, but they'll get a test. I got two big ones. We got one real big one, one very big one. And I survived it. The first one, I survived by the skin of my teeth. But I don't want to go into what it was. But I made it through it, that test, and then it's easy, you know, it's a lot easier. You don't have any more worries. God didn't like us to worry. He didn't like us to fret. And He doesn't like us to be scrupulous, but that's the worst thing He can be, is scrupulous.